So welcome to another Campfire Project Panel session. And today we are talking about vulnerability in leadership, which is a topic Christelle suggested. So instead of me introducing everybody's going to introduce themselves. I'll just start, if I may, very quickly. I'm a leadership coach and an emotional intelligence trainer, and I'm very passionate about emotions and everything that is attached to that, as well as creating cohesive cultures and helping people gap cultural gaps. Who's going next? Kenny.
I can go next.
Oh,
Go on, Alex. Go on, Alex.
I'll just rip the band-aid off. Yeah, my name is Alex Holmes, and I'm a writer, I'm an author, speaker, a podcast host, I'm an educator, I'm a trainee psychotherapist. I've written a book about men and mental health called Time to Talk, which is also the same name as the podcast. And yeah, I'm pretty much a mental health speaker, which kind of looking at emotional education, which includes emotional intelligence, awareness, and resilience. So that is me, and that is I.
great.
My name is Kerry Marmarelady Cruz. I am holding co-hosting a women's group tonight with Christelle. I've been holding men's groups for about 20 years. I got a bestseller with my ebook on how to hold groups. I train people to hold groups. They're accredited now, so therapists and people like that get CBD points. And I think I've got a lot in common with you lot, with awareness, boundaries, blah, blah, blah. I think we're going to explore all of this, as well as vulnerability. Over to you, Christelle.
Hello, my name is Christelle Pellecuer. I'm the founder and the creative director of an organization called Raison Africa. And the aim of our organization is really to bring awareness about African history to communities and young people. But also I perform and write. I'm part of a small theatre company based in Bristol. And I also run facilitation, so I do a lot of work with women in the government department and teaching them about business skills and about balance in life and everything you need to know about going out there in the world, really.
Great, wonderful. So we all have a lot in common. We're all passionate about people, and we are we're all interested in emotions and in leadership. So that's why we are starting with Christelle, because she suggested the topic, vulnerability leadership. So what does that mean to you?
Well, I think I thought about the theme because in the work I do at the moment, I'm coming across a lot about this vulnerability in leadership. I feel like there's still quite a strong thinking that, you know, leadership is still have to be the old model where, you know, you have to be really strong, you have to be a certain way, you know, the way, you know, it's very much male dominated type of leadership out there. And it's really not seen that well if you are becoming vulnerable. But at the same time, I think especially with the pandemic, we've also seen a shift in the way people are conducting themselves in leadership at the moment. I mean, you see in Zoom meeting, women having their children in the background. So we have to be a lot more vulnerable. We have to put ourselves, our private life almost in the front of what we do on a daily basis. So I think for me, and especially with the work I do with the women in leadership and doing facilitation of them, that has come up quite a lot because a lot of those women are they quite in middle management or senior management, and they've got that pressure of having to conform a certain way when actually they don't want to be having to follow that rigid type of leadership. So I was quite interested to see what other people think about it.
So what do other people think about it?
I think that we are in such an incredible age of opportunity since lockdown. that leadership is going from the old-fashioned masculine power over to a far more authentic sharing power, power in vulnerability, and being able to be part of a team, because people are going to maybe get ill or get grieved or get distracted or get into admitting their mental health issues as they get stronger and stronger, while being in lockdown, while taking care of people and attempting to take care of self. And I believe the old ways that have kind of worked in a strange way has been power over, and quite bullying. But what I found with I work with family businesses as well as, small businesses and bigger corporates. What I found with the family businesses is the older generation was very much power over. And the younger generation is very much sharing power, collaborating rather than controlling, listening and responding rather than just like creating something and pushing it out. And there has been an insecurity, because when people are used to being controlled, there's a safety that comes with it. So this bridge that's being built to get into conscious business, conscious communication, conscious teams, rather than everyone competing and the organization kind of squeezing the best through fear, is a paradigm shift. And it takes gentle management for this shift to happen, I believe. And for me, rather than male and female, I would say this is very, not just masculine and feminine, but it's also mature masculine versus immature masculine. And the mature masculine includes the feminine. The immature masculine is, I have power, I need to prove myself, I need to bully, and it's every man for himself type thing. So I'd say power is definitely an issue that I'd like to explore with you lot.
Alex.
Okay, so when it comes to my perspective of vulnerability and leadership, it's kind of similar to what Kenny was saying, but so I don't know who watches Game of Thrones here, but I loved it. And there are loads of conversations about the old ways of doing things and the old things. And we are transitioning out of the old ways and into the new ways. And I think we are actually striving for human connection when it comes to these things. We are no longer being conditioned to work in quite mechanical ways, in very rigid hierarchical structures that cause us to put aside half of ourselves before we even get into the workplace. So a lot of the things that I discuss and talk about are around loneliness and belonging, and what that means when we get into the workplace. And with so many people not being able to have actual wholehearted conversations in the workplace, I think when it comes to leadership, the leaders should be encouraging that from the top down, in order for there to be a semblance of belonging and feelings of wanting to be at work. We get told all the time to bring our full selves to work, and people are wanting to be authentic at work. But if you don't belong, if you don't feel like you belong, you're only going to ever bring part of yourself to the space. I also look at this like when I think about kind of men in those spaces, because it's like the whole thing that I'm really interested in is men and communication and conversation. And what happens when a man is going through a divorce and he has to come into work and he has to meet all these deadlines, but nobody is speaking to him about how he's feeling, but his temper and his emotionality is very high because he's going through a lot of stress elsewhere. It dictates the way he speaks to his colleagues, it dictates the way he speaks to his subordinates, how he shows up to his to people that are above him in rank as well. And it's not regulated. It kind of filters on through, but there's no one to have that conversation with them. Likewise for when people are grieving or get a diagnosis of something that's quite serious, or just generally in bad-tempered or bad moods just because of the situations in that. I think that when it comes to vulnerability, especially in leadership, considering that a lot of men are in those positions, we need to start opening up channels of communication to start having these conversations with one another, because it just works out so much better once we have that regulation and those real wholehearted conversations.
Well, in my experience, a lot of leaders don't want to show any vulnerability because that means they are showing weakness. And when they show weakness, supposedly that reduces people's respect. So you can only be a leader when you are bulletproof, basically. And when you are holding up, you're going, yes, we can all do this. I'm holding up the vision. I'm the strong person here. So everybody else is allowed to show weakness and vulnerability. But as a leader, you're not supposed to do that. And as Alex was saying, you can't have any personal issues. You can't bring them into the office. You can't become emotional because that's supposedly imperfect. And then you're not going to be the shining light and the star example anymore for everybody who's supposed to follow you. And as far as I know, that's the stuff that leads to real problems. And that's the mental health stuff. And that's when people start boiling over at some point or collapsing. And it also, in my experience, it also leads to really sometimes bad decisions, because people then make decisions out of ego rather than really being there. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic. And I guess one of the reasons I say that is one of my clients a few months ago had a heart attack. And he's a very strong, powerful leader, very, very good at what he does. He does it, and does it hard. And it was a strong pub face that came from things like family. And that's what happened. And then someone who he knows, who we both know, who works in the financial industry, basically said that this is so common where he works. And what generally happens when someone keels over and has a heart attack is the colleagues just shake their heads and tut and say, wasn't cut out for the job, as if it was a failure having a heart attack. Now, no one really discusses the impact on the family, or the way that the kids are brought up, or the impact on the other colleagues who may be scared or may think, I've only got 3 more years, I've only got 5 more years, I've only got whatever, and if I can survive this, then we're safe. Meanwhile, there's nothing safe about that. So absolutely tragic. And for me, this is where we need to share who we are, how we are, and what's going on. And I totally agree with you. And I have seen and heard different things are being forced to change. Organizations know that if they don't listen, especially these days, to the well-being of their staff, their partners, their teams, then they're not going to have staff, partners, and teams. People need to be passionate about their projects in order for the project to come into fruition, which means having each other's back, which might be brand new and very scary for a lot of people. So on one hand, we could say, yep, bad organizations doing it wrong. On the other hand, it might be the environments they've come from, and this is what they know, set into competition from school or from whichever communities. And I would say this is where we maybe demonstrate different ways and talk about the benefits of different ways, so those in power can buy into this because it makes good business sense. So much of this is education. And I believe that's something that we all do here, is one way or another, within our communities, with our work, we educate people, we demonstrate, and we ask questions. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. Specifically when it comes to what you said about the guy with the heart attack and one of your clients, but stress is a huge factor. I mean, in my book I wrote about a news piece I was watching when I was at uni in my 3rd year, and we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do like when we graduated, and then there was this man who took his own life, but he seemed to be successful, powerful, the best kind of lawyer, had a family, had children, everything, like he was earning loads, doing all of that stuff, but there was still nobody to talk to about the stress he was undergoing. It could have been deeper than that. He could have been hiding stuff, he could have been doing all these different things, but these all manifest under this idea of silence and this deception, which we kind of mistake or have mislabeled as powerful. And I think that true power comes from really kind of being so grounded in yourself and really affirming where you're at. And I think we just need more community. We need to be able to kind of be at work and be in community with one another, be in collaboration, and share the load of what is going on, and figure out how we can do that for our own emotional well-being.
Christelle?
Yeah, I think the communication is really important, and sharing with colleagues, with friends, whatever is happening in our life is really important. When everyone was talking, I was thinking about a story that came up recently where one of the lady was having bereavement at home, and she was trying to explain to her boss that she was having difficulty at the moment, and she was saying she's got to deal with family funeral, but her boss just dismissed her feeling and said, well, everybody has people dying in their life. That's not an excuse. And I think those type of leadership is when I really I just felt for her. I just thought, how can you work in such environment if you've got no support from your own immediate line manager, and if they're dismissing you? That's not a good place to work. And that's circumstance. The only place she's got is really only her friend and family. And if she hasn't got that support, it's really difficult. And not everybody have that kind of support outside work as well. So that's sometimes I wonder what else can we do when we are in that kind of situation. And very often that's what's caused even more stress, because you've already got stress at home. And when you turn to someone at work, they dismiss you. And that's had an extra stress on what you've already got. And that's when it could become, it could turn them to the other hand, can push the button to the wrong place, really. So yeah, it just, when everybody was talking about that came up.
Do you think there's a difference between female leaders and male leaders? Because when, like vulnerability is I think has a gender association to it as well. Men's vulnerability, I think, is perceived differently to a woman's vulnerability. Would that be right? I mean, like when a man is vulnerable, as a leader, it's generally seen as a good thing. But when a woman is vulnerable as a leader, I mean, I've seen posts about Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister, who's very empathetic, and and people are really berating her for being such an empathetic and showing person and showing vulnerability and being open, and saying that's bad leadership. Whereas when a man does that, it's generally lauded as a good thing.
Can I ask which people are saying this? Are people from New Zealand saying this?
This is when she does Facebook Lives, and she just reports on things, and she does it sometimes in a private environment or somewhere. And the stuff that comes, the comments that people make are mind-boggling, hurtful.
For me, going back to power, I've heard and seen, even if it's not spoken, how dare a woman be more powerful than me, put in a position of more power? How dare a younger person be put in a position of more power, or someone that's too old and is over the hill, or someone of color, or someone who didn't go to Oxbridge, or someone who English isn't the first language, or whatever? It's like, how dare someone else be in a position of power? I've also seen people in positions of power who they know that if they do not get what they want and the respect they do or do not deserve, then it's like, well, I'm taking my ball and no one's playing football. We are not going to continue funding. We are not going to continue with the team the way it is, etc., etc. So people are held at ransom. And the hilarious thing is, I've also seen people in leadership spouting off spiritual concepts of how everyone should be, without really thinking, well, actually, you know, not everyone can afford to go and lie down for an hour or half an hour a day, as you suggest, because you've got them on minimum wage. There's nowhere to lie down. And if you catch them, you're going to punish them. What are you saying?
So I definitely believe that.
That was quite an outpouring.
It is so true, and this is why I'm so curious and passionate about where does that come from? Where does you taking your ball and saying nobody's playing with my ball? Where does that come from? And this is why I'm so passionate about there being an in-house therapist in a company who can channel all of this stuff and put and kind of like bring a context to all of this. Because in high-powered conversations and with a lot, and especially with a lot of men in leadership, if you're saying I'm taking my ball and no one is playing with it, what is that saying about how you have been conditioned for like the rest of your life, you know? And the supposed team that should be kind of working with you to score the goals, but you just don't want them to do that because it's not going your way. And I remember reading an article about like, you know, men being more emotional in the workplace than women, but women are being told that they are too emotional. So what does that say to you if it's not going a man's way and he's screaming down the boardroom and locking himself and slamming doors and, you know, like pulling resources and doing all of this stuff? That says to me, very emotional person, very emotional person that everybody has to suffer with. So to kind of answer your question, Angela, about seeing like in female leadership and male leadership, I do think that because we are in a society that idealizes kind of masculine attitudes in those spaces, that sometimes a lot of female leaders can kind of play into and probably be more distant as leaders sometimes if their level, if they can be more successful in that space, you know what I mean, like, you know, to tapping into more of the masculine kind of ideals that are there, the toxic ideals that are there, and that's what I experienced. Like it was challenging to be able to kind of speak about what was going on, and you know, especially when men are in there and they assume that the female leaders are gonna be more vulnerable, which again is a problem because that shouldn't be an assumption either, and it doesn't happen. It's this really kind of weird place in why should they have to be more vulnerable? Why should they have to be more compassionate than anybody else? Why should they have to take the emotional brunt of everything when they're just trying to work in the same system that everybody else is and they're already working at a disadvantage? So I'd say that if you're an empathetic person, you're an empathetic person. That's just kind of like who you are in this space. Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of empathetic people do not get into leadership because that's not what people expect of a leader. They want you to be, they want you to be robotic and just not have that. So the ones that do get there, the ones that are on your level as colleagues, the ones that are middle managers, the ones that are kind of like in like more lateral roles to you, they're probably the ones who have the best empathy, but they really don't have the power to do much, which is why it can't really come from the top down. So we need to really just kind of turn it all upside down and start from there and kind of bring it all the way down. But I feel like things are changing, new ways are coming, and people are speaking about this stuff and having more conversations. So I'm just hoping that it just makes room for facilitators like ourselves to step in and be like, okay, so like let's wipe the slate clean and start again, and kind of like let's build on something here, I hope.
I wonder, Christelle, having worked with such women and in the field with these issues, what you find comes up and what does need to change specifically. Like, what are the most common issues?
I think one of the issues is a lot of women don't even see themselves as leaders, even if they're making quite a lot of changes in the organization. because they're not that stereotype of what you see as a strong leaders. But I see a lot of those women making change in their organization, and I very often say to them, but you're already making changes. You are leading, or you've got a vision. So why can't you see yourself as a leader? Because this, I think for me, it's that definition, what is a leader? I think that's what's really need to change, because you've already got such a way of defining what a leader is or what is a leader is not. And a lot of people don't see them because the leader they see doesn't look like them, doesn't behave like them. So I think that needs to change in a way. I think we need a definition of a different type of leadership. So for me, there's not one type of leadership. And I think that's what needs to be communicated a bit more, that it could put 5 different people next to each other who look very different to each other, but they could all be leaders in their own way. And I think unless we've got those images, people will still struggle to know what a leader is.
Well, if I may quickly, before Kenny goes, that just reminds me of this experiment where they said to children in a classroom, draw a fireman, a doctor, and a pilot. And they all drew men. And then they had 3 women come in, and the children were like, wow, they hadn't even thought about the fact that leaders could be women. And I think what Christelle was saying is we actually need to expand this. I mean, when we say leader, what automatically comes to mind? I mean, like the stereotype is the white-haired guy, with a tie and the suit. That's the standard leader. And I think we need to expand it. Maybe we should run a series of photos. This is a leader, this is a leader, this is a leader. Kenny.
When Christelle spoke then, something just smacked me in the face. I remembered 2 weeks ago realizing that 3 of my female clients who are leaders and have done very, very well in their industries and have a lot of power and respect, don't feel it. And what they had in common was that their fathers or parents or communities wanted boys, because that would give them the ticket out. That's the thing to do. That's the way. So even though these women have done incredibly well, they're still being less than for not being boys. And this isn't logical. This is emotional. And we needed to look at that emotional script and proving themselves and not being good enough and get it up to date. And for them to realize who and how they are and just step into it and make a truce with the past. And miraculously, a week or a few days after one of these women made a shift, out of nowhere, she was speaking to her mother. Out of nowhere, her father, who is a man of few words, comes on screen and basically apologizes for the way that he treated her and respected her for everything that she's achieved out of nowhere. Now, change on the inside demands change on the outside. I've needed to catch up with myself. I've needed to catch up with my script and step into being an enabler rather than a leader. I can't be asked to be a leader and to kind of carry that load. And, it's not that often I wear a tie, and most leaders around me don't. For me, it's about who am I? How do I wish to show up? Who are you lot? What's our mission? And how shall we do it together? How shall we enable this to happen, working together?
Alex, this is your turn.
I do think that several points to just follow up on, because just the nature of Kenny, isn't it? I think that there was one thing I was going to say about biases, and we are all ingrained with these biases, just because of the nature of this. So when it comes to trying to define what a leader is, it's going to be different to everybody. But in the moment, in the pressure, we're going to put a particular thing, particular idea, because that's kind of what we see. Like, I know that for me, putting leaders down is completely different. But those biases are really interesting, and that's something that we need to kind of really challenge, especially on an educational level, with young people and whatnot. And I completely forgot what I was going to say against Kenny, not against Kenny's, but to comment on Kenny's point. But I was trying to hold on to the bias idea. But it's these biases we need to really deconstruct. And I think that once we actually have those honest conversations about what those biases look like and why they look like that, we need to kind of really start to unpack and really push that into, because I think there was a study around, and it's like children, especially from as young as 3, will have a particular idea of what status people have in community, because just by what they hear and what they acknowledge and what they see from TV, from conversations in the home, from just things in passing that they see when they're out. They're absorbing so much, so they already have those biases kind of ingrained in them. I think there was a study, and there was like this girl, and she was like 3, and she must have pointed at like a brown lady and was like, "Oh, look, mommy, there's a maid." And it was like, how? Why are you saying that? But you obviously can't blame the 3-year-old, because she's absorbing the way that society has kind of portrayed it. So I think that's where we need to be looking, kind of stepping into those spaces, really kind of building on the educational piece. And it's just so far reaching. There's so many places that people need to be in order to kind of break this down. What do we focus on now, or do we focus on what will be? So go to education, go to primary schools, go to secondary schools, go in those places. Where do we begin? Because all these conversations all of these things are really kind of like, demoralizing people and bringing people's kind of personalities down, and we're not getting the best out of anybody. We're not getting the best quality conversations. And I think that's something that we need to really kind of start considering. So I have no idea. I'm going to just step into places and just try. But it needs, as we've said, it needs to be a collective effort. There needs to be a sort of, huge step of like 10,000 feet together into a place, because otherwise we're going to start seeing really tragic and horrendous figures coming out, especially post-lockdown, post this. I can't even say if it's post-pandemic, it's just post whatever this is, and for however long this lasts, we're going to see huge shifts, loads of career shifts, loads of mental health stats are going to be being thrown at us in the next few years, loads of declining social interactions and social health things, and it's just going to be both interesting and quite scary. So yeah.
So basically, I mean, it sounded like we're all saying we need a new leadership model altogether. So we're already beyond vulnerability. We're already saying there are so many things wrong with the current model that we need to change that. But if we were to start with vulnerability, where would we start? What would we encourage people to do?
Say what Alex just said, I think. I mean, I remember the first time I said, I don't know. And, oh my God, it felt so against the rules and so liberating. And the way Alex said, I have no idea. What a relief. Then we don't need to, play kiss chase like Benny Hill, pretending we know and running around in circles. And we can sit with the question and see what can emerge, surely. Recently, or a few months ago, I was on a panel and it was about diversity and inclusivity. And I was there talking about masculinity. And one of the things that I said, and this is what I've heard so much from men, is often in the boardroom or in the organization, a passionate man can seem to be an angry man to people. This is how it comes across. And as soon as I said that, there was a message in the chat from a Black woman who said, "Oh my God, I so get that. It's exactly the same for us. We need to step back because we don't want to be seen as angry." So I wonder about, in this play of showing up in the team, showing up and saying, taking the risk of saying, "I don't know, let's find out together," taking the risk of being passionate, taking the risk of being seen as angry, taking the risk of being seen as not contributing. How to do this? How does this play out? And maybe this is what we need to experiment with. But there is the stepping in. And I know that I've had a life of showing people that I mean no harm because of maybe my color, or maybe the way I speak, or maybe just being the odd bod in the community, or being the outside consultant. Showing people that I'm not on the side of the organization out to get them. So there are these fine lines to do with power and danger, and how do I show up and take part without selling out on myself and without selling out on the organization. But yeah, I don't know. Wow.
Yeah, I think it's showing up as being ourselves. I think very often women, I don't know for the men, but because I work with a lot of women, they have to be a specific type of person in the workplace. You know, some women don't even talk about they've got children because they're afraid they're going to miss out of promotion. So they're not being themselves already. So I think for me, it's really about women being able to go into the workplace and be who they are. They don't have to pretend, they don't have to hide who they are in their personal life. And I'm hoping that, you know, we are shifting away from that, and there's more that vulnerability. And like I said earlier, women are, you know, in their Zoom meeting now, I've got their children coming up during meetings, and it seems to be more acceptable than it used to be. So hopefully that is a kind of shift we're seeing, moving out of lockdown and going back to offices.
Men lie every day.
Hmm?
Men lie every day. Men lie every day. Let's just get that out of the way. Men lie all the time because it's a protection thing. So they go into work and they're presenting themselves as one particular thing that fits and works. Men don't even show up as their full selves to work. The fact that they probably won't talk about their kids when they probably feel that they would like to, or they probably don't talk about their wives or partners or husbands or whatever because they don't feel like they should, or people should, or you know what I mean? Like it's not a safe environment for them to do that. I don't think the cultures that we have at work nowadays just aren't, not nowadays anyway, but the culture that we have at work aren't really enabling people to be able to kind of, in general, to bring that stuff up. And it's true. It's absolutely, I agree. I understand what you're saying, Christelle. You know, like women, it's kind of an affront to their career prospects if they, you know, have more children, or if they want to have more children, if they want to have like a growing family, but still work at the same time. Whereas for men, it's about respect. It's about kind of about not having them kind of embarrassed or having their respectability questioned or their status questioned, or in any of those things. Men would be celebrated for growing a family. Women wouldn't be celebrated for growing a family. And I just find that all very strange. And it's just this, I just think it's a very strange psychosis that we're in. And we just all need to kind of sit down and actually sit down and talk through that. Because, and I'm kind of happy that, you know, all the tragedy that the pandemic has caused, it's very sad, but I'm happy that we have been able to hold these conversations about the way we work and what is happening next, and, you know, the kind of liberation it gives women And also the kind of liberation it gives men. Men are able to be home with their children, and be dads and be husbands and whatnot. Well, you know, it's not like, you know, roses and stuff for everybody, but in the main, that's what has been showing up. You know, they want to be able to, for the men that I speak to anyway, they're happy that they're around their kids. They're happy that they're able to see them grow up. They're not just waking up each morning, dropping them in school and going, and then kind of coming back home late and then doing the same thing over again, and then seeing them at weekends and in the odd time off they get. They're actually able to spend time with them in ways that they never thought that they would be able to. So I think that I'm so glad that things are changing and that everybody's having these conversations, because now it's to really kind of unpick. Like we had 2020, which kind of showed how things could change. Now it's really time to sit down and unpick that now, because like humans, we're just gonna get used, we're gonna get comfortable. Everyone's gonna be like, well, this is it, and then all of the issues that we put aside and hidden are gonna all come back to the fore again, and it's gonna be like, well, what was it like working at home and all this stuff, and we need to really break through these conversations now, before it's too late. Before it's 2027 and be like, what's going on?
I wonder whether it might be fairer to say fear lies in most moments, not even every day, but most of the time. And that includes men and women. Well, you know, maybe mature, maybe aware people love every day, and unaware or fearful lie every day, because that's survival. And I would say two huge things have changed. And you touched on both of them, I think, Alex. Number one is there are a lot of very successful, powerful women who are doing well. And I can think of a few men I know who are fathers, home husbands, or whatever the term is, and they love being with the kids and bringing them up. And it was the deal they made, the couple, that this is how they would work. The woman loves to work and makes maybe a lot more money than the man, and the man just would like to be at home taking care of the kids. But I would say a more important change for me is the way that men are allowed to fall in love with their kids, where a generation or two ago, there wasn't that space so much. It wasn't seen, it was frowned on. One of my clients is still ridiculed from his community. He is aristocratic for going and picking up his children from school. He shouldn't be doing that in the eyes of his peers. He shouldn't be playing with them and putting them to get to bed. Either the woman or the staff should be doing that. And he is very much the oddball who's disrespected for loving his kids. That's extreme. But I have seen more men fall in love with their children in my career than I'd heard of from the old days. And the tragedy from so many men that I've worked with is it seemed that their fathers didn't care, or didn't engage, or didn't know how, or didn't speak, or wouldn't take the lid off their own emotions. And if they're not going to be with their own emotions, then they have no emotions to share with anyone, really. And then the tragedy on the other side is a man who is fighting to see his kids, whether it's custody or not, to then be going to work and acting normally and hiding the tragedy, because it's this. Yeah, absolutely. It's tragic. On one hand, thank God there is more love in the world. There is more sharing and caring. There is more community. It is happening. It's not like it's not happening. In my world, it's happening more than ever, and it's quite normal. Thank God. And there is a long way to go. And I would say it's in demonstrating this, in being it and passing it on.
Okay, so we all agree on the fact that people need to do this individually as leaders in any role they are in. But we also have this saying that it's lonely at the top, and that a lot of people don't really, when the higher up you go and the more responsibility you've got, the less you can share, the less vulnerability you have or should have. My experience is that people get to a place where they don't want to share things anymore with their peers. in mid-management role, they will still do that. They will still confer with other people in similar roles. But once they get up to a higher level, they actually stop doing that, because that's that sense of, I need to be bulletproof, I can't be accused, or whatever it might be. And I find it really interesting, because a lot of my clients confide in me and they say, you know, this is really hard for me. I don't have anybody to talk to. So when they talk to me in a coaching session, they go blah, because they don't have anybody else to share it with. So I had this idea, because a lot of people are really lonely during the pandemic and during lockdown, that we should have a group coaching session where leaders find support, and where we could discuss the issues that come up for them, you know, with people working from home, the need to connect with people differently, but also for self-care. And the feedback I got was, no, that's too scary. I can't do that with people I don't know. And I said, well, can you do it with people you do know? And they go, no. So I was like, well, then maybe you could do it with people you don't know, because then there's no risk, especially if there's confidentiality assured. No. So
I know groups where this happens, where top powerful people get together and attempt to tell the truth. Some do very well. Some talking about it for years and years, which is a start. And these people do not work together, but they're in a similar situation, maybe in the public eye, maybe leading lots of people, maybe really needing to put on a good show for the media or whatever, but it does happen. And then there's the argument that people who don't know each other have more safety to speak about who they really are and how they really are. And then there are some organizations that I've held groups for, where in the beginning they say, no, because of my status, I cannot open up. And as soon as they're there, somehow they do, or at least they take a step, and then they take another step. And sometimes it's people from different departments, so at least it's at arm's length, or people at the same level or different levels, depending on the organization and the way it's structured. But basically, show up and try, because since lockdown, I am holding more and more corporate groups, people who would never done it before, because they're scared for their organization, for their team, and for the whole thing falling apart. It's not this might be nice and jolly, let's cross it off the mental health list. It's more like, crap, we need to deal with this now, we're in trouble. You know, it's hilarious how fear gets things going, or danger gets things going. But again, I would say it's happening. And there are a couple of organizations where I did one, maybe two groups, and then they wouldn't do it anymore. And that's entirely up to them. But those one or two did some people some good. There are others who I've trained to do it, and they do it themselves. And there are some that do it on a very regular basis. And the individuals within the groups also have private sessions for things that they don't wish to talk about in the groups, but they want to go away and deal with separately and then come back to the party. So I would say in this room, we can all hold such situations. And I can say that because I feel like I know you a lot and some of the work that you've done. So I would say, let's be available to experiment with this and to sit and listen with this, because it needs to happen. It is happening. And man, it's a lot more efficient than scuttling away and then coming back and putting on a good show, because we need our teams now.
Absolutely. Christelle, any comments about that from your work with women?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this conversation needs to happen at the higher level. I don't know any group that's with the women at work. I don't think any of them participate in such a group at the moment, but I think it's really needed. And again, yes, because we're coming back, some of those women come back to offices now, and life has changed so much. It needs a certain way of moving forward now. So I think open communication and dialogue is really important. Yeah.
Okay, well, you've got your talk show So,
I do.
Alex, and you have groups, right? So we're all doing this on some level, but how can we get this into people's heads that they need to talk more and open up more? I mean, other than walking the talk, but there's got to be something we can do. Because I'm getting to a point where I just go, come on, everybody.
Everybody buy my book and start there. I would say.
I agree with Alex.
Aggrandizing.
Yeah, buy the book, read the book, and bring it to life, because we're talking about it and doing well, and we are doing it. And to bring people in who will talk about their organizations and to actually demonstrate it, that's giving permission. And during the first lockdown, I recorded a group, I mean, obviously with permission, to demonstrate to people this is what it looks like. And this is how we speak. It's not the scary bogeyman where people are out. You're not going to be the new boy in school and everyone's going to have to beat you up or humiliate you or something. It can be like this. So surely demonstrations are the way, because then people know and people can go, okay, those bits work. No way am I going to be saying that or doing that. So I know my boundaries and now I'll come to the party. But I would say, here and now, we've kicked it off. We all have tools to share. Let's bring people to the party. Maybe next time, have a bigger group and demonstrate this. Bring some people in so we can talk about it and say, right, and now here's one we prepared earlier.
I think it's all about what we're talking about. It's about vulnerability, isn't it? So it's for people to be vulnerable and start talking and discussion whatever issues is coming up for them, and not be afraid to be judged or being seen in a way that's not having leadership. And I think, like Kenny said, if you demonstrate, you take action and do it, others will follow. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw something in here that we haven't talked about, the fact that people want to look really good in social media. So as soon as somebody shows up in social media and shows some vulnerability, they often get attacked, right? And it's important that maybe it's not being bulletproof, but it's about allowing ourselves to be vulnerable in social media, on social media. I mean, and again, that's a whole new topic.
I would say that's done, but that's where resilience comes in. Because there's no vulnerability without risk. You are handing that to people who may mishandle it.
Absolutely.
But that's for them to mishandle, because it always starts with you. It's always in your power. It's always in your grasp. I think that's what people need to remember. But the resilience comes from also being like, well, I put that out there, and what you do with it is your business. Like, I need to figure, I'm good with me, or I have the tools in place that will allow me to handle that in the way that I need to handle it. Or go through things, whether that be through supervisions or, community or therapy or anything, men's groups or women's groups or family circles or whatever. If you have the tools to be able to kind of like, protect you and heal you in a way, then yeah. But until then,
since we're talking about leadership, I mean, what we're really talking about is and I always say that any leadership starts with self-leadership, and everybody is a leader. So in that regard, I mean, as you said, Alex, we all need to learn that resilience to be able to deal with other people's opinions and showing up with vulnerability and authenticity and not be afraid to be judged. But again, we're living in times where people are censored, where people get blocked, where people get crazy. We need a lot of courage in order to be able to do that. And that's where we need people like you guys, right? Who show people how to have the tools to do it.
Do you know, I feel it's worse than that. I think courage, I totally agree. Sometimes I wonder whether it's more like a death wish, because I know that there are going to be enough people that judge me so badly. And that's not a bad thing, because not everyone's going to like me or buy me or anything like that. And the few who click are the ones that I can work with. And the ones who don't click, they'll find the right people for them. But man, I cannot do social media because it hurts so bad. I kind of flick and scroll and my stomach churns and I think lies, lies, fraud, misrepresentation, that's dangerous, that can cause harm. You know, I'm just far too sensitive for, you know, spiky social media and mistrusting, not just of social media, but also of media and the way that things are edited and people make their own stories. I was properly humiliated and betrayed by, what was it, Cutting Edge, Channel 4 series, where they chopped things up and made a totally different story to the one that was supposed to be told. And man, did they make an arse of us. And then there was something for, what are they called, Huffington Video. They did a video, again, totally different story. I mean, the Channel 4 story was totally humiliating. The Huffington story was just an opposite story, but still a good story that actually did good, so I didn't mind so much. But that's why I feel it's a death wish. And whatever's going to happen, let it happen. But I have chosen to step up and possibly get my head chopped off every now and again. But hey, I guess I'll just grow another.
I think that's part of the vulnerability again. You know, if you put yourself out there, you have to be prepared. And I think, as Alex said, you have to be resilient. So no matter what people are going to say, you're just going to have to take it. Unfortunately, a lot of people who are in the social media cannot take it. And I know there's a lot of mental health linked to social media as well. There's a lot of influencers who have mental health and actually quit the business after a while because they can't take it anymore, because they've been impacted, they've been criticized, they've been so it's difficult in itself. You have to have thick skin, I think, if you want to go into that business. But I think it's part of that self-mastery and being able to be to accept who you are, and no matter what other people say. It's not an easy thing to do as a human being.
No. Okay, well, so shall we have some final words, some final suggestion? I mean, we talk about vulnerability and leadership, so some final words on that. Everybody, just one final suggestion, closing comment.
It is possible. It's not a conversation of pessimism, or it will never happen, or it's unlikely, or this is not a berration on on like men or women or anything. That's all. I just think that it's possible, and I think that we can definitely have these conversations and grow in these spaces. I think the fact that we're having this one is a sign that there is a guiding light towards something that will kind of provide a new way of being, especially for the generation that comes up. When they step into workspaces, when they step into universities, when they step into schools, there's going to be structures there in place, because we're having these conversations now for what happens when I'm a decrepit old man trying to navigate my way through the TFL in 2067 or something like that. So I'm just, you know what I mean? I want there to be some sort of progress, and I believe it can happen for sure.
I think for me, it's just the only way to go, really. I think vulnerability, you have to show your vulnerability as a leader and be who you are as a person to lead a team. So I hope that people will slowly embrace being vulnerable in the workplace.
I think the first step's got to be, rather than yes or no, I don't know. And then from I don't know, check out what might be. What are my options? Who is out there to show me how I might communicate better with my team, how I might bring out everyone's power, everyone's gifts, everyone's leadership. And once the options have presented themselves, then take a step. And it doesn't necessarily need to be lifetime commitment, because everything needs space to change. But I don't know what's out there and how shall I engage is surely a fluid, open, vulnerable, powerful, being the love, sharing the love way forward.
Okay, so for me, I would say the conversations we're having are really important, where we see each other as whole human beings. I think it's important that we start creating an environment where people can show up as whole people and not just, leave part of themselves at home and just show up as, with a facade, but being able to express themselves in such a way that they can be seen for who they are, not for just a part of what they think is a leader or somebody in authority or whatever it might be, but somebody who can show up and say, as Kenny was saying, I need help. I'm not a perfect human being. I'm transparent. And also the acceptance that all emotions are okay. It's just how we deal with them. That's what we need to learn as well. But it's not I don't feel anything, everything's good, I'm fine. But the ability to actually share the emotion and just saying, you know what, again, as we all shared, bereavement, divorce, all of those things, how they impact on us and on our mental health and on our leadership, and being able to talk about those things without losing credibility or authority or respect. So those would be my final words. But yes, well, it's been certainly an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. I know my head is already going into, God, all these opportunities we have. Thank you everybody for coming and joining together, because again, together we're stronger and we can move things. And that's the whole purpose of these conversations. So thank you so much.
Thanks. Good to hang out with you all.
Thank you.